You know, you're reading through the book of Genesis and then you see it. You just stop because you come across the ages of the people in it, and they're just mind-boggling. We're talking about lifespans that are so long they make modern records look tiny. It's a real head-scratcher, and it's puzzled people for thousands of years. So let's dive in and try to unpack this thing. Look at that number, 969. Just let that sink in for a second. What does that even mean? It almost looks like a typo, doesn't it? It's so big, it feels like it belongs in a myth, not a historical text. But there it is. And this is who that number belongs to. The Bible says, point blank, Methuselah lived to be 969 years old. To put that into perspective, he could have watched entire empires as we know them rise and fall within his lifetime. And he wasn't alone. Adam lived to be 930. These aren't just long lives, they are, by our standards, almost impossible to comprehend. So that's the big question, right? How is this even possible? Are we supposed to take this literally? Is it some kind of theological symbol? Or maybe a scientific memory of a world that was just different? Well, as we're about to see, the answer isn't simple. It's more like a puzzle with pieces from theology, science, and ancient history. Okay, so let's start with the first way people look at this, the theological view. For a lot of believers, the answer doesn't start in a science lab. It starts right back in the pages of Genesis, with the idea of a world that was designed for life, not for death. The core idea here is that when humanity was first created, it was very good. In the Garden of Eden, death just wasn't part of the plan. It wasn't in the system. So these incredible lifespans are seen as a kind of echo of that original state, a peek at what life was meant to be, totally unbroken and untouched by decay. And this is the turning point. The story in Genesis 3, the fall of man, changes everything. Once sin enters the picture, death becomes a reality. And if you follow the family trees in Genesis, you see a clear pattern. Lifespans start to get shorter and shorter, until finally, in Genesis 6, God says mankind's days will be limited to 120 years. From this perspective, shrinking lifespans are a direct result of humanity's broken relationship with God. Okay, but what if there's more to the story? What if science has something to say about this? Let's switch gears and look at how some scientific theories might actually offer a biological explanation for these crazy long lives. So one really interesting idea is this concept of cleaner genomes. Basically, the theory goes that the very first humans had, well, a more perfect genetic blueprint. See, over thousands and thousands of generations, tiny errors, mutations have built up in our DNA. But way back then, humans might have had way better DNA repair systems and super strong immune defenses. That would have slowed down the aging process a lot. And it probably wasn't just the genes, right? You got to think about the world they lived in. Imagine a planet with none of our modern pollution, a world with way fewer toxins in the environment, and less of that harmful cosmic radiation bombarding us from space. That combination, a perfect genetic code and a perfect environment, could have been the recipe for some serious longevity. And that idea of a different environment, it's so big, it really deserves its own section. Some theories go even further, suggesting the early Earth was basically a different planet, with a kind of natural shield protecting everything on it. Okay, this leads us to something called the canopy theory. Now, it's not accepted by mainstream science, but it's a popular idea in some circles, and it's worth understanding. It suggests that a thick layer of water vapor once surrounded the entire planet, kind of like a giant greenhouse. This canopy would have blocked a lot of that harsh cosmic radiation that damages our cells and makes us age. The theory goes that this canopy collapsed during the Great Flood, which totally changed the environment and led to that sharp drop in lifespans you see in the Bible right after. And you know what's interesting? The Bible itself seems to hint at a totally different early climate. Genesis chapter 2 talks about a time before rain, when a mist would just rise up from the ground and water everything. That really paints a picture of a calm, stable world, which fits perfectly with the kind of environment the canopy theory describes. So we've looked at the analogy, biology, and even the planet itself. But there's another angle, and it's a big one. What if we're not supposed to read these numbers like a biology textbook at all? For this next section, let's look at the numbers, but this time through the lens of their original historical context. See, the Bible wasn't written in a bubble. Other ancient texts from that part of the world, like the Sumerian king list, also talk about people living for insanely long periods. But look at the difference. The Sumerian kings were said to have reigned for tens of thousands of years. All of a sudden, Methuselah's 969 years seems almost, well, modest in comparison. And that is the key. It's a huge difference. While Genesis seems to be using this idea of a long ago golden age, it keeps it way more grounded. The people in Genesis aren't described as magical, semi-divine kings. They're just people, living under one God. The numbers are big, yeah, to show it was a special time, but they aren't completely mythical.
Okay, check this out. Let's look at another number that pops up, one that might just be a clue that there's something else going on here. 365. That number should sound familiar. It's Enoch. The text says he lived for 365 years before God took him away, which, of course, is the exact number of days in a solar year. It suggests a perfect, complete circle.
So, what do you think? Is that just a wild coincidence? Or is the author doing something clever here, using numbers to send a message about Enoch's righteous and complete life? It definitely opens the door to the idea that these numbers are communicating a theological truth, not just a biological fact.
All right, so after looking at this from a bunch of different angles, where does that leave us? Well, it's pretty clear there isn't one easy answer to this ancient question. The truth, it seems, is woven from a lot of different threads. Let's recap the big ideas, right? Is it a theological truth showing us God's original plan for humanity? Is it a biological memory of a time when our genes were just better? A reflection of a lost world with a protective shield? Or is it a symbolic story using numbers to teach us something deeper? The answer might not be picking one, but seeing how they all could work together.
And maybe the best way to think about it isn't which one is right, but to see it all as a complex tapestry. The long lives in Genesis could be weaving together the threads of divine purpose, humanity's original biological potential, the unique conditions of the early Earth, and even the storytelling customs of the ancient world.
And that's really the question I want to leave you with. When we see these incredible numbers, are we looking at history, theology, metaphor? And this is the big one. Do we really have to choose just one?